What's the worst thing you've said and regret? Story 1. A coworker lost a dramatic amount of weight, and I showered her with compliments. One time, she looked really upset, so I stopped. She died from cancer a few months later. No one knew she was sick, but I still felt crappy. This was a while ago when I was heavy into diet culture. Now that I know better, I no longer comment on anyone's body or weight. Story 2. I was 16, had a huge fight with my grandmother. I don't even remember what it was about, just that I was very mad about it. I stormed out of the kitchen and told her I wish you had cancer or something. The same night I regretted my words and felt really bad but never really apologized with her. Almost a month later she was diagnosed with cancer and after a week she passed. I remember being by her side the last few days and crying and whispering at her ear that I was so very sorry, that I never wanted her to get cancer. She pressed my hand very strongly but she could not really talk. I am 40 years old now and it still haunts me. I have told my wife as a cautionary tale to not let your mouth run wild because you'll regret it. Story 3. I worked at a large company. A girl who worked there and I were pretty close friends for a bit, but she hadn't come to my department in a while. One day she comes in with 3 customers. As soon as she opened the door I took one look and said, "Wow, I can believe you're pregnant," in front of everyone. She told me she wasn't. I thought she was joking, so I doubled down and said, "Yes you are. Look." She had just gained a lot of weight. There were like 15 people watching this interaction, including several of my mates. Haven't seen or talked to her since. That was 15 years ago. I still shudder when I think about it. Story 4. Went against advice and told a long-term friend I have feelings for them beyond friendship. Listen to advice, peeps. Pain and regret is all I have for it. Story 5. When I was 15 my family had a huge fight and I told my dad I don't want to see you again. That night he had a heart attack and died. I think about it every single day. Story 6. I told my sister I hated her and didn't want her around. Our family was abusive, and she left 2 weeks later at 15. I was 9. I didn't see her again until I was 13, and then not again until I was 16. We're both adults now, and I love her more than anything. We're best friends and about to move in together. But I always feel guilty for not being kinder when life was so hard for her. Story 7. I mentioned my friend's STD in a public group setting so they all realized she had it. I have no idea what the F I was thinking. Clearly wasn't. I was immediately disgusted with myself, apologized profusely and left the pub out of embarrassment. We're still friends but every time I think of this moment, I just want to cry. Story 8. Had a kid cursing me off on Xbox and I told him well Santa's fake, thinking it wouldn't be so bad. I could hear it in his voice. No he's not. He was so heartbroken. I promise I feel terrible. Story 9. As a child my friend with body image issues said something that pissed me off, so I was like I guess you're too fat to get it. Feel bad about it 15 years later. Story 10. Not me but my dad. My dad is a boomer but he doesn't act like one. He can be naive at times, but he always makes an effort to understand and respect people, and he believes in true equality across the board. He also loves his wife my mom and after 35 years is still over the moon about her. He calls her his queen. In fact, he calls everybody's wife their queen. If he wants to invite his best friend and his wife over he says, "Why don't you come by on Saturday and bring your queen with you?" He works in a small engine mechanic shop. They sell stuff like dirt bikes and ATVs plus all the stuff to go with like oil and helmets and jackets and spark plugs. One day maybe 20 years ago, a man walks in and starts browsing helmets. Dad walks up to him to help, and the man says his partner needs a helmet. Dad asks about what sort of activities they'll be doing so he can advise on whether or not they need a full face helmet or not, visor, etc. Finally, he asks about size. The man says he isn't sure what size his partner would need. Dad innocently says, "No problem, just bring your queen in." The man abruptly turns and leaves, clearly offended. Dad is confused, has no clue what happened. Then he hears his coworkers giggling behind him at the service counter, and turns to them, only to be told that man is gay. He was mortified. The man never returned and Dad never got a chance to apologize and explain his misstep, and it still haunts him to this day. Story 11. Was planning to get together with an ex. He was the only person I ever loved. He ghosted me. This was a pattern with him. A few weeks later he posted on social media some bullshit about being a great friend to people. I responded with anger. I said horrible things, told him he needed a good therapist and that he'd die a lonely old man. He died by suicide 8 months later. His body wasn't identified for 5 months after he was found. Turns out he had become addicted to anything he could get his hands on and had cut ties with everyone, including his son. I was devastated and regret the things I said. Now I tell people that I love them, family, friends, lovers. It doesn't matter if they say it back or not. Things can change in a heartbeat and I never want to regret not saying I love you to the ones I care for. Story 12. My high school girlfriend was one of the most amazing people I ever met to this day and treated me ridiculously well. Welp, senior year came around and my friends convinced me that I should date around before college, so I broke up with her. She was devastated, especially because I told her who I wanted to date. She was upset, and started going after her all the time in the classes we had together. When my new flame told me she was get harassed she was and was just glares. I confronted my old girlfriend and told her you were just a starter girlfriend anyway. Immediately regretted it, so ugly of me, and it destroyed her. We even ended up getting back together later on, but I don't think she was able to let that go, rightfully so, because who I was back then. She's married with 2 kids and incredibly successful, gorgeous still, and I love that for her. Hope she literally never thinks about me and just is loving life. Without thinking I said to a foreigner friend, maybe hell put a baby in you, joking about her husband. Never really spoke to me again. I don't blame her. She had a stillbirth at like 26 weeks less than a year before. Forgetting about her loss and making that joke was unintentionally cruel, and I absolutely regret saying it. Story 13 don't know was blackout drunk, but apparently it was so bad they want repeated to me. You'll never know if it was something bad or they just want me to feel that way forever. Story 14 am adopted, and as a shitty teen I told my mom, you can't tell me what to do. You're not my real mom. I watched her heartbreak and have regretted it for the last 2 decades. Story 15 the moment I said yes when my ex-GF wanted us to move in together. I knew it's a mistake, I felt it, and I saw it coming, and yes, everything became true. Story 16 I had a friend who was going around to different doctors because nobody seemed to be able to figure out what was going on or why he was getting these splitting migraine headaches pretty frequently. We were just hanging out having lunch one day. I asked him about how everything was going, and he was saying how he was getting worried because he thought it might have been a brain tumor after he had done some research online. I quoted the "It's Natatuma" line from Kindergarten Cop. He kept saying that he really thought it was, and how he was going to see if he couldn't get an actual MRI done, but I just kept saying it over and over again. He got mad that I wasn't taking it seriously, and he just got up and left. About 2 days later, he had a stroke that his parents said was likely a direct result of a brain tumor, and he died. Kicking myself over and over and over again about that one. What if I would have just said maybe it is, you should go to the hospital, or even if I would have had my last words to him be literally anything other than a bad Arnold Schwarzenegger impression. Why was I so insensitive about his legitimate problem? Told someone no one would care if you disappeared during an argument. Story 17 a friend was chatting to a girl he just met at a pub years ago. I, being a good mate, was talking to her friend that my mate wasn't interested in. I noticed the friend had an accent, so I asked where she was from. She said Germany, to which I replied, oh cool, east or west. It wasn't taken well at all. Story 18 once in my wildest frame of young drink aggressive mind somehow survived saying I was going to burn a bouncer's house down with his family in it. Got my together AK, stopped drinking all the time and realized what I'd done. Bang, out of order and completely disgusting thing to say. Safe to say I lost some sleep and reviled myself for a good year or two. Karma will come for me for this one no doubt, and I deserve every bit of whatever comes my way for it. Story 19 a girl kept bullying me. Guidance counselor told me to turn the other cheek and be a good Christian because she was struggling at home. Her father was just sent to prison. Things escalated. A physical fight happened. I won. ID just had enough and lost my temper. You'd think she'd leave me alone. A week after that she was saying to me again. Had joined a conversation I was having with my friends about plans with my dad that weekend. She started talking about my dad. I don't remember. So I said at least my dad is home. The way her face just widened into open mouth. Gaping fish shock while everyone laughed. Before this I was the quiet kid. It wasn't that I wasn't witty or clever, I simply held back. She never spoke to me again. Last I checked she went to law school and is still trying to get her dad out of prison. Story 20 I was 13, my first real boyfriend. I had broken up. He played a joke on me months later that he wanted to get back together. I was excited. When he started laughing said he can't believe I thought he was serious. I told him, at least my mom is still alive. Hey, who can blame her though? If you were my son, I would have killed myself too. I regret it all the time. Also, joke's on me. My mom killed herself 2 years ago, so, what I do to apologize to him now? Story 21 telling my now ex that she was a failure. Maybe if I wasn't so mean then I wouldn't be single for the last month. But she says she's doing much better without me and I hope this to be true. Story 22 I'm not coming with you. I said this to my grandmother after she was at the hospital with me for 12 hours after my suicide attempt. The deal was I could only leave if I stayed with her under her supervision. I regret it every Christmas. Yes, I tried on Christmas Day. Story 23 I hooked up with a straight friend coworker a long time ago. I was pretty messed up about it, as it was a really unexpected hookup and his first with a guy, and we weren't sober, which I wasn't used to. He also immediately went from being someone I spoke to every day to being super distant, which I understand now but at the time really upset me. I was angry as well, and when his recent ex who really didn't like him asked me what was wrong I told her, and she told everyone. He wasn't the nicest guy, but he didn't deserve to be outed to his work and our entire friend group. It's not something I do today, but man, I regret it massively. We never spoke again. Last I heard he was married with a kid on the way, so I think he managed fine. Story 24 I had a bipolar manic attack. I told a coworker I liked her, didn't realize she had a husband so said we can't be friends, and then like a week later got drunk and basically told her I was watching her Facebook. Who knows if ITLL ever lead to repercussions. I just know I wish I could say sorry or forgive myself. Story 25 I told my mom I couldn't FKN stand her, and I hated her then went no contact. She passed away a few years later. To be fair, she was a mom and an alcoholic, at the time 17, I really couldn't stand her, and I told her so to her face. I'm now 48 and think about that all the time, and she's been gone 20 years now. I've never shared that with anyone. Story 26 an oath to join the US military. Today, I'm the mod of regret joining and I also live in Canada because of negative feelings that started back then. Story 27 I told my mom can she shut her kid up in the store because a woman's toddler baby was crying really loudly and had been for the entire trip. I really regret saying that. Story 28 I told my older brother something to the effect that he was and he died by suicide that night. That was going on 32 years ago now. Not a day goes by where I don't regret that and just wish I had told him I loved him. Story 29. In 2nd grade, I told a girl to jump off the bus and die. I was a new kid at the school and this girl immediately latched onto me. She would act like my friend but then make up lies about me behind my back and ruin any other friendship and actively terrorize me. Late in the school year, I was so sick of her, and she was just insulting me constantly on some field trip bus and I just snapped. She was absolutely a little psychopath, but I felt guilty for the longest time for telling her to basically kill herself. I don't think anyone should be told that, ever, especially since I was deeply suicidal then and long after. Story 30. Got into heated argument with my ex-GF at the time. She had started it and I was particularly pissed, so I had said something to the equivalent to "What value do you actually add to my life? Like, what do you actually do?" and regretted it immediately. We ended up making up afterwards, and she said she let it slide because she knew I'd said it in anger, but I could tell those words never left her. Every time she did something nice, she'd say something like, "So I'm glad someone values my cooking this time," or say things like how I was low effort and imply I was the useless one, and this went on until the end of the relationship. You can't that back in once you've let it loose, fellas. Story 31. Not something I said necessarily, but I was drunk the last time I spoke to my dad. He said, "I can tell you've been drinking again," and sounded so disappointed and concerned. He died about a week later very suddenly. I am now 5 years sober from alcohol, but that phone call still makes me so sad to think about. My dad made a lot of mistakes raising me, but he cared so much. Story 32. My dad is a good man and a wonderful father. He has just always been a bit socially awkward and emotionally stunted, hard for him to show affection, make friends, etc. Once in my angst-ridden teenage years we were having an argument where he refused to budge on a rule he had laid down, and I told him that no one likes him, my friends and their parents all think he's weird, and everyone talks badly about him behind his back. It has been more than 20 years and I still tear up when I think of that. How I said that just to hurt him, and it worked. I very often find myself wondering if he remembers it too, and if he has been paranoid ever since. Story 33. I told my emotionally and socially stunted sister that the reason she had no friends was because she's just so horrendously unpleasant as a person. I knew it was a sore spot for her, and she was devastated, especially since her roommate had just moved out, and I had insinuated that it was because my sister was so awful. She's still so upset, and it's been like 15 years. I feel terrible. Story 34. Met someone from a forum we were on in the late 90s. She was determined to visit me on her vacation, though I tried to talk her out of it. Antisocial. Her husband dominated the conversation. She just sat there silently. Week later, someone else on that same forum asked me what I thought of her, and I said I was not impressed. That person told her and everyone else what I said. Huge falling out. I felt awful about it the moment I said it. Then that whole forum shitstorm and being ostracized served me right. But that person was for turning it into the huge thing it became. Turns out she was quiet because she was mostly deaf. I had no idea. And her husband was a raging abusive narcissist. Hence the domineering attitude from him. I didn't know. I apologized to her years later when we ran across each other. She said it really wasn't a big deal to her even back then. The drama that happened was stupid, and she'd forgotten all about it. Still feel wretched when I think about it. Story 35. I told someone he's the reason his wife offed herself. He didn't deserve that, no matter how much, and that guilt sits with me daily, even after apologizing. Story 36. I regret defending my mom and other family members to friends and partners through and until my late 20s. I regret avoiding therapy because every therapist I met confronted me with the fact that I needed to hold them accountable, and I actually believed that bad love and a shitty family was better than no love or family at all. The whole time realizing I had plenty of non-filial love in my life that I took for granted. Story 37. I was talking to my grandma on the phone, and she said how she wished I'd come to visit more often because she hadn't seen me in almost a year and missed me. I was exhausted between my classes and my full-time job and thought she was trying to guilt-trip me, so I rather rudely said, "And when would I do that, when I can't even find time to sleep?" She didn't really ask again, and it was about 6 months before the next time I would come to see her. Little did I know she had stage 4 cancer that was spreading very rapidly. She hadn't been diagnosed yet at that time of us talking. I never saw her healthy again. When I came to visit after she'd been diagnosed, she was already just a shell of herself, and then it was very fast and she passed away a couple weeks after that. I regret being rude when all she said was that she missed me. I should have said I missed her too because I did. I regret not seeing her the year before she got diagnosed when cancer hadn't taken over her yet. Story 38. Telling my mom I hope she died. She put me through a lot though, mentally and physically, but at the end of the day I know it's her first time living too, and I was an autistic kid and she didn't know. We still have our things and she is not the best mom to me, but telling her to die isn't fair. I was 12 something, but it still hurts that I said that to her. Story 39. This wasn't my idea, but I should have shut it down. I allowed a vote in hotness contest to take place in a club I was in charge of in college. I had assumed I would be voted least hot, figured I could handle it, and deduced that way it would be harmless fun for everybody else. I did surprisingly well, and the person who got last place left in tears. Stupid. I can't believe I thought that was a good idea, but I was 21 with poor self-esteem. Well, talk about shooting your wedding. I don't photograph weddings. It's just not worth it to me. I don't know why I said I'd even consider it. Story 40. Told my dad it is your full 24H before he died. Still eats away at my soul. 11 years later. was young and very arrogant. No idea why I posted this. Just came on its own. Story 41. I went out with a coworker of mine and her roommates to a bar, started talking it up with one of them, and was so drunk I mixed up her name with the other who I was not vibing with at all. Fast forward a week, same coworker says she's going out and I ask her if her roommate would be there, not realizing I had the wrong one. Easily top 3 worst dates of my life. I broke that girl's heart and haven't forgot about it, 19 years later. Story 42. When I left my last job, they threw a going away party and they asked me if I miss anybody or anything. I was pissed at my boss at the time, so I just said, nope, it was just a bad way to go out. I've kept in touch with my boss and it's all good now, but I regret saying that. They were good people. Story 43. I've never had a good relationship with my father, so when I was around 14, I said something in anger that I deeply regret. I told him, don't touch me, it makes me uncomfortable. There were reasons behind my outburst. His behavior at the time was a major trigger, so I don't place all the blame on myself. Still, I regret saying it. Although our relationship has never been perfect, he has never touched me inappropriately. After that incident, I noticed he stopped showing physical affection that much, and that hurts. I didn't truly mean what I said, and am sure, just like I've never forgotten that moment, he hasn't either. He even cried afterward. Story 44. Sometimes the worst thing isn't even a huge insult. It's a moment you didn't show up, didn't say I love you, or stayed silent when someone needed you to speak. Story 45. I was a vet tech and most of us all have a very dark sense of humor to keep us going. My dog was going in for surgery, and I just as a joke to the surgery tech without even really thinking said, alright, ready to kill my dog. I forgot that a few weeks earlier a dog passed away during surgery due to unexpected circumstances under anesthesia. She looked so hurt and I realized I up. Story 46. Living in London, going up escalator, blocked both sides, you should stand on the left, pissed off, and nobody saying anything, typical non-confrontational people, you'll do something, shout up angrily to the person's blocking it to get out the way and stand on the left, arrive at the top, realize it was a blind person and their handler. Have to hide for several minutes in a corner like some self-imposed naughty step. Story 47. My nana was close to dying, in terrible pain, and she was forgetting a lot of things. I went into the room to comfort her, but when I entered I wasn't sure if she'd remember me as a kid or as myself. I'm 18, but transitioned at 12 or so when she said who's there I choked up and just said it's me. She said, Felix, are you there? I should have had faith in my nanny knowing me. Story 48. My friend's dad died when he was in high school. I tried setting him up with a friend in college, and he spent the entire time looking at the floor, and then all he talked about was his dead dad. I told him eventually he'd have to stop being an open wound, and I still feel so horrible about it. If I could take it back I would in a heartbeat. Story 49. I wish death upon me so my mom could see it and feel bad. It was due her being so mean to me, not on purpose though, you know mothers, we are okay, we love each other, but she could make me feel really terrible. Story 50. I brought up my friend's cousin's suicide when trying to make a point about drugs. It didn't come out the way it intended to, ruined our friendship for 2 years. It's the one thing I've always regretted. We're great friends again now. Story 51. Background. My Filipino grandma gets so easily riled up and has screaming matches with everybody who is in an argument with her, literally red-faced, vein-popping, wide eyes full of anger. Half of me gets worried her high blood pressure will blow through the roof, and the other half is so sick of her screaming and insults no matter who she is arguing with. One day, I was unfortunately in an argument with her, and in the heat of the moment I screamed, I don't f***ing care if your high blood pressure goes up. I regretted it immediately but left the room to calm down without saying sorry until later. We're good now, but I took a step back and realized I'm becoming like her. I hope to break that cycle before I have kids. Story 52. Me, sarcastically, who raised her. This was my comment to a coworker who is now, against all odds, a friend. She forgave me. The context was talking about her daughter, 10 years old at the time. I noticed she's extremely smart and polite and overall a great kid, but couldn't STFU and leave it at that. I thought it was funny. I didn't realize she was sharing custody with her ex. Story 53. The last thing I texted to a friend before he overdosed. If you quit texting me I can get home sooner to play video games. I was obviously joking. It's how we talked. His mom even thought it was funny when she went through his phone afterward. Still sucks though. Story 54. A teacher at college used to talk about how her daughter was a rebel, and at 19 would go out and party all the time, etc. I made a joke in class one day about blowjobs and she asked to explain to the class what to embarrass me. It was her first year teaching, and I said, why don't you ask your daughter? That's what she's doing when she's out overnight. She ran out of the room upset. I still regret it to this day. My high school best friend and I had a falling out our senior year. Her grandparents were raising her and her grandfather died during our senior year. She called and gave me all the info for the funeral and asked me to come. I did not. I can't even remember why. When she called a few days later and asked what happened, I said I had better things to do that day. She sounded so broken, saying goodbye. Never spoke to her again. I regret being so mean in her time of pain. Story 55. This is going to get a lot of hate, and I pray this gets buried. It's got a long backstory, but it doesn't change what I said. I told one of my best friends at the time who was having suicidal thoughts to just do it. I still think about it every once in a while. Luckily they didn't and they have a kid now. They even said they forgave me, but I don't forgive me, and I don't know if I ever will. It's been years now. Story 56. I was 7, in foster care. My mom was really sick. had been for years. She was so frail and skinny, I couldn't actually go in the hospital room with her, it was sterile, so we used a phone to talk while standing outside the glass or her hospital room. We could see into her room like she was in a zoo exhibition. She talking to me about how she can't wait to come home. For all of us to come home. I was in foster care. I just remember being so angry. We had this conversation over and over. Just a little more time she would get better. But she wasn't. She looked like she was disappearing as each day went by. I lost it. I told her she was a liar, that she was never going to come home. She didn't. That was the last time I got to speak with her. She died not even 48 hours after I screamed she was a liar and left. That's probably the worst things I can remember saying. Story 57. I yelled at my grandpa for treating my grandma like he died shortly after. I guess in hindsight You've said some truly vile things, but something about arguing, them dying, and not being able to tell them you love them comes with a lot of regret. Story 58. Once as a teenager I threatened to falsely accuse someone close to me of SA. Even though we worked through it, I've never stopped feeling like, because it was such a horrible thing to do. Story 59. Not me but my pledge dad from the fraternity I joined in college. He and one of his close pledge brothers were out drinking common theme and were seriously intoxicated. They got into an argument over something and my pledge dad told the other guy, I hope you have a seizure and die, seizure boy. Thankfully he didn't, but I remember my buddy telling me what happened and just how sick he felt about the whole thing. Story 60. When I was 16 I told a friend about how I had been no contact since I was like 11 with any extended family. Not even cousins and grandparents who live like 20 minutes away because of family troubles. She said who cares? Her grandmother had passed like 2 months before and her granddad had died a couple years before that. I told her I'd tell her who cares the next time one of her grandparents would die. When I think back on that I think I went too far considering how recent one of those losses was. Story 61. When my son was very young, his father was a deadbeat. He also spent my whole pregnancy alone while he partied and cheated. I got fed up and finally put him on child support. He showed up to my house to confront me and this is how it went. Mayor, just like your dad. Himmy dad is dead. Meeksackly, you might as well be dead too. He immediately tried to hit me and tbh I don't blame him. Despite how trifling he had been, I was wrong. Story 62. I am a survivor of domestic abuse. The kind that landed me in the hospital and fighting for my life more than once. I told my other ex, someone who I moved continents for, and he didn't show up in the 4 months I spent in that continent. I would rather go back to being beaten than have to deal with the pain he put me through. I told him he was the most horrible person I had ever met and that while he never laid a finger on me, how could he? He never showed up. He made my abusive ex-husband look like the stuff Prince Charming is made of. While I do believe I had every bit of right to be in pain and lash out, that specific comment was wildly uncalled for and not true. He was but not the level of my ex-husband was. Story 63. I was a dumb kid. At 12 I asked my brother why is his friend so weird looking and his nose is so big. His friend was around the corner. Heard it all. He was only 9. He left quietly. Till this day I feel so bad. Wished I never opened my mouth. Sorry kid. Story 64. My mom was a drug addict. I asked her not to come to my wedding because I didn't want her going on the nod and embarrassing me. Looking back, bow that she's gone. I'd rather have had her there. Story 65. This is not something I said, but I closed fist punched my disabled sister while she was driving when I was 14 or 15. I'm 33 now and I apologize to her like once every 6 months. Sorry to crash the thread, this continues to plague me. Story 66. Told those that I loved they stole from me even though they did. Hated confronting them because I loved them with all my heart. So I told them off in the most nasty never with you again convo. Years later, more mature, fudge the 300 to 509 worth of theft. I miss them. Family really is everything and you just have to learn to navigate around it because no matter what you got hiccups like mine. Story 67. I regret telling people I was suicidal in a lot of ways. But who knows where I'd be if I didn't. I just didn't realize at the time the amount of anxiety I must have put the people who cared for me through. Story 68. Once, many years ago, I alluded to the fact that I was angry enough to physically harm my partner. I have my fair share of guilt and regret. But I've never laid a hand on a woman or child or loved one. I've never even spanked my 5-year-old son, and this one makes me cringe every time I remember it. It took some rebuilding of trust, but luckily I was forgiven, and we went on to get married and have a kid. Story 69. Called my best friend basic and unoriginal during a fight in college. She had just shown me her wedding dress design sketches. I was jealous because she was getting married and I had just been dumped. Story 70. You're right, I'm sorry, they weren't, and I wasn't, but I couldn't bring myself to admit that being blood-related doesn't give someone a free pass to commit abuse. And that I was desperately clinging to fond memories of when things were good because at the end of the day, family is everything. That one statement was an open invitation for the abuse to ramp up, and I allowed it to do a number on my emotional health for years. Story 71. Me and my younger sister were arguing about what I don't even remember anymore. Something stupid and childish, I'm sure. I was 16, she was 12. For some reason, I still have no idea why because ID never said anything like this before. I snapped and said, well, you're going to die before I do anyway. Not long after, though I had turned 17 and she had turned 13, she got sick. After like 3 days of her being sick, and seeming to get worse instead of better, my mom takes her to the doctor. Doctor says it's just the flu. So okay, she stays home from school for a few more days, but now appears to be significantly worse off. After school, instead of getting on the bus to go home, my mom shows up with my little sister, and picks me and my other sister up. We go to the doctor together, who ends up rushing my sister to the hospital that was across the parking lot from his office. Turns out she had leukemia, but no one had thought to check for it understandably. She got rushed by helicopter to the Children's Hospital in Vancouver, then died early the next morning. And one more thing, since I'm dumping this anyway, we used to play this stupid game for years. We called it Last Hit. Was kind of like tag, only it had no time limit. You could tag the person and say last hit, and they could get you back right away, or in a few hours or days, whatever, didn't matter. Just a goofy game we used to play anyway. That day, before she got rushed to the Children's Hospital in a helicopter, in her last moments of being conscious as they were drugging her, I was at her bedside, along with everyone else. She weakly touched my hand with her finger and looked at me and said last hit, to which I smiled at her and said, "I'll get you back when you're better." Okay, that was it. Those were her last words. I wish every day still that I could switch places with her. If I could somehow wave my hands and be dead so that she could have had a life instead of me, I'd do it without a second thought. I'm 34 now, and as dumb as that argument we had was, I still think about it all the time.